I'm going to assume that most of you here today are type nerds. Why else would you be spending your weekend listening to talks and more talks about typography? Hi, I'm Sneha, a designer, art director, and typographer, and I currently live and work out of Bangalore, India. However, I grew up in Dubai, UAE, and I did all my schooling there, dressed up like a flower on occasion, apparently studied Arabic, and enjoyed drawing diagrams and making really elaborate charts. If you're wondering what makes me qualified to give this talk today, I have 5 tattoos, including an ampersand, so obviously I have every qualification required. I also have 2 very perfect cats, Ruby and Iggy. They have absolutely nothing to do with my presentation today, but everything to do with who I am, and this is my talk, so God knows I'm going to show them off a little bit. During high school, my closest friend, then and now, was applying to this mysterious place called NID. That's the National Institute of Design. And she was applying to study this mystical subject called design. Up until that point, I had my eyes set on architecture, but I decided to give NID a shot. Every designer from India tuned in right now is probably thinking, you didn't know about NID? And to you, I say, I had never heard of it. So I bid my goodbyes to the only place I'd ever considered home and moved to Ahmedabad, India. This was my first rodeo in India, and I spent nearly 5 fantastic years in Ahmedabad, met some of the best people I still know, and I'm lucky to call my friends, some of whom are also speakers at Type Weekend. During our first year at NID, we had a fairly inconsequential assignment, and as you'll soon find out, not so inconsequential to me. The assignment was pretty simple. 4 frames to show the evolution of any object, and the 5th frame for us to imagine what its future would look like. Some of my classmates picked daily objects, others picked more specialized niche objects, and yet again, as you'll notice, a common theme in my life, I chanced upon a couple of videos about typography. And I thought, could serif and sans serif type be considered objects? For this assignment, at least. I went ahead and did it anyway. I was so proud of how painstakingly I constructed each one of these perfect A's. I had found this thing that in my mind was the perfect balance between something that was mathematical and logical and something that was just straight up beautiful. Then over the years, I spent my leisure hours hoarding fonts and watching Helvetica documentaries. I browsed new foundries and downloaded all the trial fonts up for grabs and found any excuse to test them out in the wild. Meanwhile, my friends and classmates realized I had this unusual skill to identify typefaces. They would ask and take my advice on their font choices for their designs and documents. I never paid too much attention to this. All I kept thinking was, why is this so hard for everyone? They're just letters and words. How and when did I give myself the permission to love type? So finally, in the summer of 2018, almost as a joke, but also because I finally had some time to work on my silly ideas, I sent out the first unofficial issue of Tip Top Type Tips to 10 of my most non-judgmental friends, including my sister. It was a single-page PDF newsletter in the form of an email attachment. And if you know anything about me, I had the identity and branding of Tip Top Type Tips well before I ever knew what to do with it. The contents were pretty straightforward. Some typographic basics, new and interesting foundries for readers to check out, free and paid typefaces I enjoyed trialing, details and trivia about their creation and design, most importantly, why I recommend trying these out, and finally, some articles and longer reads for those who might be so inclined. The general feedback was that the articles and the items needed to be more actionable and that the newsletter was a little too heavy with content. So I got to work, learned just enough HTML to code a weekly newsletter, figured out how to host and post it, built a simple landing page for people to sign up, and the new and improved Tip Top Type Tips newsletter was out. I sent it to a little less than 100 subscribers. This new version and the issues that follow are bite-sized. Just 3 tips an issue. Recommendations, resources, tools, and articles I've curated and collected in a light-hearted read. This, for example, is what I shared in the first issue. The very notorious, the very talked about difference between what a typeface is and what a font is, a recommendation of a typeface that I had just trialed and used on the landing page for Tip-Top Type Tips, and finally a tool that I swear by, which allows you to easily identify typefaces on websites. Fast forward to today, and I've shared dozens of tips to just shy of 2,000 subscribers. For example, how did Futura become one of the most talked about and one of the most used typefaces till today? How are typefaces designed? Some more type recommendations and things like that. This is something I received recently, which is safe to assume is from a reader. And it's little notes like this that keeps me going and keeps me motivated. So you might be wondering, what's next? And where do we go from here? Tip-Top Type Tips will be an online publication for typographers, designers, enthusiasts, or anyone really to understand, appreciate, and use typography better. It'll always house the Roundup, which is the fortnightly newsletter with 3 tips about typography, stories, fonts, tips, and insights. It'll have some resources specially curated to uncomplicate and demystify concepts of type and design, a blog about type for nerds and novices, and finally a community to discuss, ask, collaborate, learn typography with other type enthusiasts, designers, and typographers from around the world. I thought it might be a good time, and this is a good platform for me to share a bit of a sneak peek on what I've been working on so far and some designs of the new and improved Tip-Top Type Tips. So let's take a look. Yeah, so this is what the landing page will look like, a place to sign up, latest from the Roundup, some resources that I'm working on as we speak, and I'm really looking forward to launching those soon, and of course some featured articles from the blog. This is another page from the site, which is about the community, what you can expect to gain from the community, who you can expect to interact with, why you should consider signing up, things like that. So let's step back to the top. Why did I ever start Tip-Top Type Tips, and why is it important? Why is it important, at least to me? It was always about making typography more accessible and more understandable. The kind of apprehensions and fears we have with respect to using type in our day-to-day is fairly consistent. It's almost always the same. I recently asked a question on Twitter, which was, what are the 3 most common typographic concerns people have? And these are some of the responses I received. So I consolidated that into this. How to pair fonts, how to store and remember the cool fonts, how to identify and distinguish typefaces, how to keep up with the trends in all the hot new type. Can I use the same 3 to 4 typefaces on loop? How much is too much, and how can I decide? How to typeset for screens, and how to use color and weight to create hierarchy. So if you're someone just getting into design, or want to appreciate or understand design or use typography better, if there's one thing I want you to take away from today, it's this. It's a quote by the great and seriously underrated Kevin Napur from the cult classic and a personal favorite, Mean Girls. Don't be afraid to try things. Keep a few rules, ask for and take feedback. Fight for your right to use Comic Sans. Experiment and have fun with type. Don't let the haters stop you from doing your thing. That's it for me. Hope you enjoyed the rest of the talks and workshops at Type Weekend. I would love to hear your thoughts and feedbacks in the Q&A session we'll be having post this. Feel free to drop me an email. And if you'd like to hear more from me and Tip-Top Type Tips, follow us on Twitter. And please do consider subscribing to the newsletter at tiptoptypetips.com. Because why should the nerds have all the fun? Bye.